Hello guys, welcome back. I hope you're doing well. As you can tell by the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about my experience growing up queer in the Middle East. In typical Charlie fashion, I'm going to talk at you for a bit and then you guys ask me some questions which I will answer at the end. I do have a few disclaimers to make just before I jump in. The first one is that this is my personal experience. It is based on factors and influences and it is my personal account. But on that note, there are a few kind of facts I do want to set out just so we understand kind of where my account comes from. So to start off, obviously I'm white. I am coming from a white, middle class, liberal and progressive family background, an atheist background. I went to a private British school. I'm no longer a resident in the UAE. So yeah, all these kind of factors play a part in how I was treated and kind of they all shaped my experience. And lastly, but most importantly, linked below are going to be some queer and Muslim creators and influencers and activists. So please go and support them and follow them because they are doing some incredible work, like having their narrative and being represented and kind of truly kind of having a voice. So please go and check them out below. So I feel like I should start from the beginning. I lived in the United Arab Emirates between the ages of 4 and 18. The United Arab Emirates, shortened to UAE, is a country made up of 7 emirates located in Western Asia and it borders Oman and Saudi Arabia. The UAE has kind of really boomed and flourished through urbanization and tourism. It's a very popular holiday destination. But on the other side of that, it also has one of the highest world percentages of immigrants, with only an estimated 20% of the population being UAE nationals. So Arabic is the official language and Islam is their official religion. And like I briefly mentioned, I feel like I should start by saying I had a very privileged upbringing in the UAE. I was very lucky. I went to a private British school and I got a great education and I had a great time while doing it. I was very lucky to have the experience I did, and that does kind of play in and kind of shape my experience. But when I mentioned that I grew up in the UAE, the question that usually follows is how does that work with me being trans? And the bottom line is that it doesn't. Until the age of 18 and moving back to Bristol for university, I didn't know or understand that I was trans, but I did know before then that I was attracted to women, or a part of me was. And I came out to my parents the first time when I was 17, and the biggest fear they had wasn't having a queer kid, but it was the fact that it was and still is illegal to be gay in the UAE. So as a result of the legal system there, I didn't really know or learn about the LGBTQIA community. I didn't learn about it in school. I barely had sex ed. I think we had one lesson in biology about the egg and sperm process of intercourse, so let alone any kind of queer sex ed or anything like that. The internet was heavily restricted and monitored, so you couldn't really Google or research much on your own accord. There was a gap in my knowledge, and I'd soon find out that this gap is where I would align myself and where I'd find my identity. So I was definitely a bit of a late bloomer. While I was just doing some research and touching up on the situation over in the UAE, making sure I wasn't missing anything or spreading wrong information, I came across a Stonewall Global Workplace briefing from 2018, and they just kind of summed it up quite concisely. So they said, given the restrictive legislative framework in the UAE with regards to sexual orientation and gender identity, and particularly the threat of the death penalty, any LGBT related activities in the region should be approached with caution, which is why I was surprised that while I was just doing my little fact checking for this video, I stumbled across articles stating that Dubai in the UAE was going to host an LGBT+ and gender identity conference in May of this year. Very quickly I found that some articles had already debunked this, saying that it was a scam, and further reading kind of led me to find out that the company supposedly hosting the event, the World Academy of Science and Engineering and Technology, makes its money hosting these low-grade conferences. As I tried to figure out a bit more about whether this was true or not, I could only really find kind of two sides of the story. So there were articles from Pink News and LGBTQ Nation, which are obviously very pro-LGBT publications, and they were talking about how homophobic Dubai was going to host this conference and it was putting people at risk. And then I thought I found a middle ground when I found a Yahoo article, but I found out they just reposted the Pink News one, so that didn't count. And then on the other end of the scale, I found that there was an article or like a post on albab.com, which again, by doing a bit of reading and looking around, I found that it was obviously an Arab publication. So yeah, the fact that there wasn't much to find, and the website itself for the event was very bare. All it had was like 15 academic resources they were going to be discussing. So yeah, there's not really much to go on, and it has left me quite intrigued, to be honest. But whether the conference is legitimate or not, it's naturally causing some concern, as whether it goes ahead or not, people are kind of stepping forward and talking about it, and if we're speakers and activists and educators creators and researchers are getting involved in kind of volunteering themselves, thinking it is legit, it could end up with their safety being put at risk. So yeah, I just thought the whole article situation, combined with the fact I was just fact checking for this video, it just kind of made a bit of an interesting conversation really, and an interesting discussion. Very one-sided obviously, because you can't talk back. But yeah, as I've said, I've still got there in the end. I figured it out, but due to the conservative country that I grew up, I did just have to be a bit more proactive with finding my answers and a bit more careful with figuring it out. So I kept up to date on global news. I vividly remember being 16 and having, like, I think it was Sky News on, seeing how the US had just legalized same-sex marriage in all 50 states. So yeah, I kind of kept up to date where I could, and then when I touched back on the UK, start looking for the answers I wanted and doing my own research. But I just think personally that whenever you are queer or you identify as part of the LGBT+ community, that if you're going away to a new country that you've never been to before, or a foreign country that's very different to that of your own, I just think you need to put your safety first, and just to do a little bit of research to see what it is like there, because you shouldn't be put in harm's way just for being who you are. And it would be nice to think that one day that wouldn't be needed or necessary, but unfortunately that's not the situation right now. So I believe it's just important to put everyone's safety first, and kind of making sure that you know what you're going into. Whether that means not supporting that country or that place, then I totally understand that, and I partially agree. But yeah, I just think there is no price on people's safety. Yeah, so that's kind of the whole summary of the situation. With all this, I did my usual thing, like I said, and asked you guys if you had any questions, and you did. So I will crack on with those. The first question I got was, did the views around you have an impact on what you thought about the LGBTQ community growing up? Partially yes, because there were no views, so I didn't have a view. It wasn't like they were spreading anti-LGBT hate speech. It was literally just that there was nothing there. There was a complete vacancy. So yeah, there was no community, there was no discussing it, there was just kind of, it didn't exist. So as a result, I didn't realize it was a thing until my late teens. So yeah, I didn't have a lot of exposure to it. Did people you know, / if any knew, accept it? Or was it hard to find people that did? Like I said, checking my privilege a little bit, my parents did accept me. They were just worried about my safety, so they were really good with it. The more I think about it, like, my friends did accept me. Like, the friends that knew were completely fine with it. Even the people around me that I wasn't particularly close with, I did get a bit blasé. I think I relaxed into it. And again, coming back to factors that influenced it, is that I was in a private British school. I think I was in a bit of a bubble. I don't know if the teachers knew. If they did, they didn't say anything. Yeah, I was never kind of told off or bullied or anything like that. But yeah, again, like I said, I think that is kind of part of the privilege kind of growing up. At that time, it would have been like 2015, 2016. You know, it wasn't like in the dark ages. I think the people around me that were my age understood, and I think it was just a matter of the people didn't speak out of turn about it. You know, I think people understood the severity of the situation if something were to be said or kind of spoken about in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then maybe, again, that's the fact that I was lucky and privileged enough to be in this little bubble in a private British school. How did it feel for you personally to grow up queer in the Middle East? Like I said, I had a good time growing up in the Middle East. I was very lucky for the experiences that I had. I wasn't the happiest I could be. I definitely could have been happier. There were some things that weren't stacking up, and I was quite confused for a bit. On the whole, like I said, once again, checking my privilege before it wrecks me. Yeah, I think my experience is very different to that of others, given the factors that played into it, which is why it's so important that please go and check out the links and the accounts below of people that haven't had it as easy as I have. I'm very aware that I'm very lucky, so please go and listen and read up and hear about their experiences and their narratives, because their voices deserve to be heard. Finally, the last question I got was maybe not relevant, but how different would transitioning be if you still lived there? It's totally relevant, because I wouldn't have been able to transition there, and that's the bottom line. Back in 2016, in September, I think the UAE kind of altered their legislation so they could perform like sex reassignment surgery on intersex children to fix them. Yeah, kind of sex reassignment surgery is still very much illegal. But being part of the LGBT community, you can't identify as trans, like that's not accepted there. I'm not sure if people remember, but Gigi Gorgeous was denied entry into the UAE, being a well-known trans YouTuber, and they knew who she was. They denied her entry. Being trans isn't really an option there. And I'm kind of quite lucky that I was blissfully unaware and ignorant to my identity until I was in a country where I could do something about it and start my transition, because I feel like that would have made it a lot harder to deal with in process. And again, I know I keep saying it, but it's why it's so important that we give the people a platform who do go through this and aren't as lucky as I am to kind of just fly out the country to go and figure myself out. So yeah, please do go check out the links below. So yeah, so those were the questions you guys had, and this was my personal account on growing up queer in the Middle East. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was a bit of a different take. It was kind of a bit more serious, kind of a bit educational, but still me talking about being trans, obviously, and still me answering questions, and I'm still in the same seat and the same beanbag. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please do give it a thumbs up and a like and a subscribe and all that fun stuff if you did. I always get awkward at this stage because I never know how to kind of sign off. I don't have a sign off yet. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'm going to love you and leave you. I will see you all soon.